Welcome, everybody. Thanks for being here today. We're going to give a minute here as folks roll in. Really appreciate everyone coming into the Community Food Systems at the Legislature's Working Group's virtual convening for our midway through the 2025 legislative session. And it's great to have you all here. Thanks for making it on a beautiful Friday afternoon. I know there's a lot of competing things that folks want to be doing, so glad that you're out here. And to get things rolling, we're going to have folks introduce themselves in the chat so we know all who all's here. Just your name and organization, if you've got one, a bill that you're tracking in the legislature right now, one of your priority bills. And and then we'll give it a minute. We'll let folks roll in here. And I hope you're having a great afternoon.
I might stop for just 1 second, Andrew, so I can get my
Oh,
links.
yeah, no problem. Do do. Let folks roll in. So folks are just joining. We're going to be putting our names and organizations in the chat to introduce yourselves and any bills you're tracking in this legislative session, if any. And then we're going to get going here. Yeah. Really excited. So today, our agenda, we're going to give a little bit of an introduction for folks on what we do with this working group, how we bring folks together through the network on working together on legislative issues for Oregon state policy and on food systems policy. Then we have some amazing speakers that have joined us. We're going to have Rep McDonald, couple folks talking about the Immigrant Justice Package, and then Alice Morrison at FOF talking about food systems this legislative session. And whenever we got the slides up, we'll pass it on to Lauren, who has been leading this group fearlessly for a while now.
Well, and at this point, standing a bit to the side and applauding while the crew runs it, which is so great. So hi, everybody. My name's Lauren Gwynn. I'm at Oregon State University's Center for Resilient Agriculture and Food Systems. We have a new name this year after being around since 2013. And I've been with Oregon Community Food Systems Network since before it was a network, and I've had the opportunity to work with organizations around the state to grow this amazing movement. And one of the things we do together is policy. And as a statewide food systems network, we are really well situated to work together on a statewide basis, looking at our statewide legislature and all the different laws and money and everything that they are considering every year. So we have a working group called Community Food Systems at the Legislature, and I think a number of you today are on that. And our purpose is to build our individual and our collective capacity to influence public policy to support our shared vision of a more equitable, sustainable, and resilient food system. And we do lots of things together. We create this thing called Bills to Watch, which Sophie has been stewarding this year, and she will be sharing that out. We build our skills and info together, sharing info. We have lots of resources on our website, which we could put in the chat. We get together in convenings like this and also in our working group meetings to learn from each other and then to share that knowledge and info out across the network. And then what's really, really important is that we are highlighting the different policy priorities of our member organizations and close partner organizations, not only what the policy priorities are, but what are their strategies, what are their opinions and their voices. So we've been doing this since 2019, and it's really been amazing to see how we really truly have, I believe, built our capacity. So I want to share, this is really important. I say this every time we have a convening, and it bears continually repeating. OCFSN itself is not an advocate. Oh, go back. That is not an advocacy coalition that votes on and then advocates for a set policy platform. If we were that kind of policy coalition, we would go from a whole pile of bills that people care about down to a very small set, and we would throw our advocacy energy behind those bills. We are not that. What we are a place is where all of our different member organizations are choosing their own policy priorities based on the work they do. And then we help put them all together, help them organize topically, and then create ways to share that out widely. And I think this is a really important thing for folks to remember all the time. The voices at the legislature are the voices of these member organizations and their close partners. And OCFSN has gradually become more known to the legislature because of the way that we do this work, and also because of, the funding they've entrusted to us for different grant programs we've used, and our ability to bring people together to talk about the importance of community food systems there. But this is how we do it. So with that, I want to move us into what we're actually doing today. So I'm going to hand it back to Andrew.
Great. Thanks, Lauren. Yes, very important. To reiterate, we're not a food policy council, but our model is unique and has gotten us really far in the last several years. So next, we have three different sets of speakers, and we're going to be talking with Representative Rep Finger McDonald from District 16, who represents Corvallis and Adair Village. She's the vice chair of the House Committee on Agriculture, Land Use, and Natural Resources and Water, and member of the House Committee on Higher Education and Workforce Development. And we'll go to you first, Rep McDonald. Thank you so much for being here and speaking to our membership, and then we'll pass it on to the next groups. And I think we'll have a little time for questions after each presenter. We'll take a couple questions from folks.
Yes. Hi. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here and to be the new representative for District 16. It's interesting being a freshman legislator in a session where we had over 4,000 bills dropped at the beginning of the session, and learning how to manage that and prioritize things has been I feel a little bit like a duck where I'm like smoothly sailing on top of the water and madly paddling underneath. I have a great staff. My chief of staff has lots of experience in the building, so he's been really helpful. But we've now passed our first committee deadline, so we've winnowed bills down. I learned very quickly that I had to focus on the bills that were in committee and were issues that I really cared about, but I'm sure that along the way there were some bills that I missed just because there were so many. So as they come up for votes or come into my committee, that's really when I've been focusing on them. So right now we're working through House bills that have gotten to the floor. So they made past that first committee deadline. And we're starting to take up some of the Senate bills in committee. So in ag, we call it ag and everything else. In ag and everything else, this week we started having public hearings on some Senate bills. We sort of tend to front load the session with things that are going to be bipartisan and are fixes and not really controversial. And so now we're dealing with some of the things that are coming up and were divisive. Yesterday, I spoke on the floor about climate education, but then actually had to rush off the floor before the vote because I had a doctor's appointment. But I was assured before I left that it would pass without me. So even though I didn't get to vote, I was happy to see that go through. In a lot of ways, I feel like being a new legislator is like going back to school because I'm learning so much about things that have been outside of my kind of bubble. So I came to the legislature after being at OSU for 25 years, working first as a graduate student and then working in the horticulture department. And on the ag committee this session, we've been doing a ton of work around water rights and trying to make the process of applying for or contesting water rates more efficient, and making sure that the agencies that deal with those kinds of things have the funding they need. So I've learned a lot about water rights that were kind of outside my area that I kind of knew about. And then there were also days when it was really fun. And Katie Fast, who's the government relations person from OSU, laughed at me one day because we had a hearing about extension funding, and we had a hazelnut grower come and talk about the importance of the hazelnut breeding program. And Katie said, you were so happy to be talking about that kind of thing in your committee because it was totally up your alley of what what you know about. So there are days when having a background in ag science is, makes it really fun and exciting. The other committee I'm on is higher ed, which is also fun and exciting. And there's a lot of overlap as we talk about workforce development with, with areas related to ag. The other thing that I found that's really fun about being a new legislator is, as an adult, there are very few times when you start something new and you make 10 new friends. We don't do that as an adult very often. And I'm coming into this body with really fascinating people. And that's been really fun too, just meeting the people and making the friends. And it's a lot like being, a freshman in college when you're all sort of thrown in and you learn to survive together. So as far as sort of bills and priorities this session, I decided that in my first session that my priority bills would be really focused on local issues, because I felt like as a freshman legislator, I wanted to sort of learn the process before taking on sort of big sweeping ideas. And so one of my priorities this session has been looking at waste management in your whole sort of northwestern region of Oregon, because much of that waste is coming to Coffin Butte, which is in my district. Coffin Butte is expected to come to the end of its life in 10 or 12 years, sort of depending on who you ask. And only 6% of the waste that comes to that landfill comes from my district. So I've been talking to a lot of people about landfills and methane and leachate. And it was interesting to walk down the hall and talk to somebody from Lincoln County and say, hey, I have this bill, you should be interested in it. And they said, why would I be interested in that? And I could say, well, because 100% of your waste comes to my district. And so we all need to think about how we're managing this long term. So, so I talk a lot about landfills, and it's been really interesting. And that bill is now moved out of the policy committee. It was in energy and environment, and it's now in ways and means. So the funding is kind of a big question this session. So we'll see what happens. My other top priority is looking at supporting rebuilding the wastewater treatment plant in Adair Village. The wastewater treatment plant they have is about 70 years old. It was left by the military. It's the only wastewater treatment plant of its kind left operating in the country. And they, within their urban growth boundary, have the potential to build 800 or more houses. And it would be workforce housing. It would be really important for my district and our community, which is one of the most rent-burdened communities in the state. And we know that a lot of the people who've bought houses that have been built in Adair were renting in Corvallis before they were able to purchase a home in Adair. So having that housing would really help with access to housing in our community, and with employers who are having a hard time keeping employees because they can't afford to live in our area. And so my standalone bill actually died, but Representative Elmer was putting together a project looking at small communities who had asked for infrastructure investments that would directly result in housing. And so she picked up Adair Village and that funding ask as part of her package, which was really great. And she actually had initially not included it. And we asked about it, and her staff said, no, she's not including it. And then Representative Elmer actually got on the phone and called my office to talk to us and ended up changing her mind and including it. So I was really grateful to her for following through and including us. And in the hearing, we had like 5 minutes total for testimony for that bill. And she specifically called out the investment in Adair Village as something that would be really positive. So again, something that's now in Ways and Means. We'll see where it goes. But I feel like being part of that larger bill actually makes it a more likely, makes it more likely that that will get funded. And then you saw the other side of what I'm doing is the committee work. As vice chair of the House Committee on Agriculture, Land Use, Natural Resources, and Water. As I said, I'm learning a ton about water policy. And it's nice to have some understanding of ag, but I'm not a farmer. I'm an ag scientist. Actually, I've been working with students over the last 10 years rather than doing research, but I have a background that allows me to understand some of this work and the importance of what we're doing. So that's been really fun. It's an interesting committee because it's the only committee that has co-chairs. Representative Helm and Representative Owens have been working together for a long time and are now running the committee as co-chairs. So although we do have some bills that were party line votes, it's not a committee that has a lot of it doesn't feel polarized. We don't have sort of fighting across the aisle over issues in that committee. So that's been really nice to work in that environment. My other committee is higher ed. We do have a little bit more contention in that committee, but I still feel like we've been able to do some good work. Representative Hudson, who chairs the committee, has done a good job. And we've seen some interesting policy ideas around building workforce and supporting students so that they're able to stay in school, which I said early on was one of my priorities. I knew too many students who've been sort of living on the edge as they try to afford school, and so making sure the resources are still in place to help them is really key. Whether they're at a four-year college or in community college or in some kind of trade training program. As far as sort of bills that you all would be interested in, I am totally in support of House Bill 2979, which is the money for the Farmer and Rancher Disaster Resilience Grant Program to support farms and ranch and food hubs. I voted in favor of this bill in committee. After we got through all the House bills in committee, we then are able to prioritize the bills that are in Ways and Means so that as we push for bills to be funded, our committee has an idea of what we really highly value that we've sent down to Ways and Means. And 2979 was on the list that I submitted. So I'm hoping it was on other people's list and we can get it through. So I'll continue to advocate for that as I have opportunities. Other things, there's some ag-related bills that are in workforce committee that haven't come to the floor yet, but we'll see where they go. I've been, funding for extension, I think was my top priority on my Ways and Means list because I just love extension. But there are other things that we did, like one of the Republicans on the committee whose office is next to mine came to me with a bill about providing scholarships for students interested in ag. And I said, absolutely, I'll get on board with that, and was able to say, and you can't tell them in September that they're getting money for the school year because they will have to have registered for classes before then. So I was able to fix their bill a little bit. There's also some work on incentives for new farmers and ranchers through the Oregon Department of Agriculture, the bill that would allow irrigation on produce for sale on lots under half an acre. That was something that I think a lot of the people who got kind of caught in that regulation, didn't even know that it was a problem for them to be selling their produce. But it was something that I supported because the students that I worked with, it wasn't uncommon for them to sort of start their journey into farming on one of these small lots and then, really get hooked and decide they wanted to farm. And eventually their goal is to have larger operations, but allowing them to get started on a small lot and irrigate their crop and sell it felt important to me for the students that I served. We've had meat inspection funding asks. We just this week heard a fix for some of the poultry inspection issues, funding for the Oregon Agriculture Heritage Commission. So, it's a wide range of things in addition to all the water use bills. And it's, mostly it's just really fun. I think because it's an opportunity to learn a lot and to work with interesting people. And I think there's never been a time when being a state legislator has potentially felt more important because of all the disruption and uncertainty at the federal level, that being able to do good work at the state level feels really key for your path forward. It also makes it really uncertain because we don't know what funding is going to look like, if we're going to have big funding holes that are left by the loss of federal grants, and how decisions will have to be made to fill those holes, which is a little bit terrifying, but is kind of the looming unknown cloud right now. I actually had a bill that seems to have died that would have provided some backup funding for biomedical research that had lost funding. But I think in the mix of money asks from a freshman legislator, it got set aside for now. But that one felt especially personal to me this session. So I was really hoping it would go somewhere. But that's kind of, I feel like I'm just rambling.
Great. Well, thank you. Yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you. And maybe we can take one question if someone wants to raise their hand. We'll have a question for Representative McDonald. And yeah, thank you for taking the time to speak with us. Really appreciate it. Does anyone feel like they've got a...
I have a question.
There we go.
And this is connected with, so everyone, like I'm in Sarah's district, and I'm curious if you are hearing from a lot of your constituents in the district about these kinds of agriculture and food related issues. They're all really important to us.
Right.
And sometimes we're not sure if the broader public is as excited about it as we are. So are you getting that?
A little bit. I heard a fair amount when the USDA people got fired. You often, when groups come in, if they have local people, they'll bring them in. So a few times I've talked to, I'm trying to think who it was last. The last people I talked to were organic dairy farmers, which we don't have dairy farms in my district, but so it's not huge. And I think I represent OSU, which is related to the Extension Service and the sort of academic kind of side of agriculture in our state, but I don't have a ton of farms. We have some small farms in our district, but not a lot. And so I think, and also I'm new, so people haven't like figured out to bug me yet. So I'm not hearing a ton. I would love to be able to work on some, one of the things I was going to say is, moving forward as a policy group, I would love to talk to you about, things we need to do and work with you, on food systems, because, even though I don't have a ton of agriculture in my district, it is something that, as someone with a background in horticulture, I value.
Well, so that's a huge reason. And you had said, well, I'm a freshman and we're just getting started. I don't know how much I can say. Everyone, this is like the moment where we are building a relationship with a representative who cares about our issues and wants to hear from us. And some of you out there have built great relationships with legislators who are in senior positions now. So Sarah, thank you so much for accepting our invitation to come and get to know this group better. And we will definitely be in touch with you.
Yeah, I look forward to that. We can potentially do some fun things.
Great.
So thank you for
Thank
having me. I'm going to
you.
jump off and go make my child go outside.
Do it.
Thank
Do it.
you.
I know that
Appreciate
child. Let's get her outside.
it.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Great. And now we wanted to invite some folks who are working and closely working on the Immigrant Justice Package. We have Sammy Teo and Cynthia Ramirez, Sammy from Oregon Food Bank and Cynthia with Pacoon, to speak with us about what they're working on and what's been going on with the Immigrant Justice Package this session. So thank you for joining us, Sammy and Cynthia.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've also got some other OFB folks here. I see Mackenzie, Lindsay. So Mackenzie, Lindsay, if you want to jump in at any point around Food for All, please feel free to. So thank you all for inviting us and having us here today. My name is Sammy Teo. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a public policy advocate at Oregon Food Bank. And I will pass it over to Cynthia.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you for inviting us. My name is Cynthia Ramirez. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a policy associate with Becun, Oregon's Farm Worker Union, and I will start us off today. Next slide, please. So what we're going to talk about today is the Immigrant Justice Package. And when we talk about Oregon values, we often talk about taking care of each other. This is not just a saying, it's how we build strong communities here. And whether someone was born here or came to Oregon seeking safety and freedom, we all want the same thing, to work hard, to support our families, and to contribute to our neighborhoods and our communities. And right now in Oregon, too many of our immigrant neighbors face barriers to meeting these basic hopes. And these are not just individual struggles here, they impact all of us. Because when families in our community can't meet their basic needs, it weakens the fabric that holds us together. But we do have solutions. And by ensuring everyone has access to food, housing, workplace safety, and legal representation, we are going to make our whole state stronger. And this is about strengthening Oregon. And we recognize that immigrant Oregonians are vital to our communities and to our future. Next, please. And I'll pass it back to Sammy.
Thanks, Cynthia. So I mean, I don't have to tell you guys, we all know that nationwide, we are facing attacks on our immigrant communities. There's rising anti-immigrant sentiment and hate, and mass deportation efforts. And so it's really critical that Oregon continues to not only be a safe place for immigrants, but also a welcoming state. And yet many of our neighbors in Oregon who are immigrants are facing impossible choices and unnecessary barriers that are not only hurting their families, but hurt all of us. We know essential farm workers, many of whom these are the farm workers who plant and harvest the foods that flow through our food systems that we all rely on. These essential farm workers are forced to work in dangerous, life-threatening conditions during climate disasters because they can't afford to miss a day's pay. And Cynthia will talk more about this later. We know immigrant families are facing hunger, eviction, and homelessness simply because of their immigration status. They are excluded from critical and often life-changing food and housing programs that so many of us have access to. Indigenous language speakers from present-day Mexico, Central and South America are unable to access critical services or even protect their basic rights simply because of language barriers. And immigrant Oregonians, including children, face complex legal proceedings without any representation because immigration proceedings are civil, so you're not entitled to an attorney. These barriers don't just harm immigrant families, they weaken our state by preventing workers and neighbors from fully contributing to our communities and the folks that they surround themselves with and our economy. Historically, Oregon has recognized that we're stronger when everyone can participate fully, but critical programs that protect basic rights are at risk of closing or have dangerous gaps in coverage. You can go to the next slide. And so this is just a snapshot of immigrants in Oregon to kind of level set. So 1 in 8 workers in Oregon is an immigrant, making up a vital part of our state's labor force. 1 in 15 children in Oregon live with a family member who is undocumented. And immigrants in Oregon pay $5.6 billion in federal and state taxes annually. That's billion with a B. And undocumented immigrants in Oregon pay $353 million in state and local taxes. So a lot of narratives that we're hearing about these folks not paying taxes is completely false. They are essential to a lot of things that we rely on, all the things that are a key part of our food systems, our healthcare systems, education systems, and they are our friends, our neighbors, ourselves. I'm an immigrant myself. And so those narratives are really false because these are people that are fully Oregonians and are contributing in many ways. And I'm not going to dive into it, but they actually pay a higher percentage in terms of taxes compared to billionaires in terms of like ratio to their income. But I'm not going to go into that. We can go to the next slide. I'll pass it to Cynthia.
Thank you. And what we're going to talk about is the solution in the Immigrant Justice Package. And immigrant justice organizations that represent communities statewide. We have united and behind these 5 proven solutions that will strengthen our state by ensuring everyone can meet their basic needs and fully contribute. And I just really want to highlight that Oregon's agriculture industry heavily relies on immigrant labor with more than 72,000 farm workers. And as Sammy said, most of them are immigrants from Mexico, Guatemala, and Central America, and many of whom speak an indigenous language. So everything is really connected from our food systems to the folks who work there. And our farm workers, they're very proud to be Oregonians as well. Some of our members at Pecun, they love it here. And someone told me, he said, I'm very happy to live in Oregon. I already feel like this is my state, this is my country. And so it just really highlights that farm workers are the backbone of Oregon's agriculture industry. And farm workers more than not are immigrants, so everything is really connected. And while the situation is even more dire, when we consider that farm workers are also often disproportionately affected by extreme weather conditions. They risk their health and safety working in harsh temperatures and dangerous conditions to ensure that our state's food system is maintained. Yet despite their vital role in our food system, they are excluded from critical programs that allow them to take care of themselves and their families. So we all win when we support the health and well-being of all of our farm workers, our immigrants who give so much to the state. And like Sammy mentioned, again, before, immigrants are being heavily targeted by the feds, and the threat of mass deportation can lead to an increase in labor shortages for farms. So now I'm going to talk about the 5 proven models, which is Farm Worker Disaster Relief Fund, Food for All Oregonians, Indigenous Language Justice, Universal Representation, and the Home Fund. So next slide, please. I'll introduce the Farm Worker Disaster Relief Fund, which is House Bill 3193, and this protects essential agricultural workers during extreme weather events, making sure that the people who grow our food don't have to choose between their safety and paying rent or feeding their families. And this models from the Climate Change Fund, but also expands on on heat or smoke to other disasters such as snowstorms, ice, heavy rain, flooding, pandemics, and so on, because extreme weather disasters it just not happens in the summertime. It also happens when it snowed a few weeks ago and our farm workers are not able to go to work because it's dangerous to work in, it's dangerous to drive in those conditions as well. So this fund is really about protecting the health and safety of farm workers to not make them feel that they have to go to work because they can't miss out on a days of a paycheck because everything is so crucial. And like mentioned before, they're excluded from really critical essential programs. And I'll pass it back to Sammy to talk about Food for All.
Thanks, Cynthia. So Food for All Oregonians, at the core of this policy is the understanding that food is a human right and that no one should be denied food based on where they were born. And despite this, Oregon is facing a hunger crisis, and it is only getting worse. A lot of you probably know that food pantries across the state are confronting record-breaking levels of demand, and the Oregon Food Bank has never before seen this level of urgent need in its 40 plus years of food banking. So we are in a growing crisis. Last year, we saw 2.5 million visits to food assistance across the state. That is a 31% increase from the previous year. And I know a lot of our partner agencies are even seeing 50 to 60% or even higher. Despite this increase in demand, Oregon Food Bank expects to lose 90 truckloads of food due to loss of federal funding under Trump's USDA, which is it's millions of pounds of food. And food pantries are often a staple for low-income Oregonians because many immigrants and refugees are excluded from SNAP. And SNAP is the most commonly utilized food assistance program in the nation. This exclusion is a major reason why immigrants and refugees in Oregon are 2 times more likely than white Oregonians to face food insecurity. This is despite the fact that immigrants in Oregon contribute billions of dollars in taxes annually. And so our policy solution here is to establish Food for All Oregonians, or FFAO, essentially making food assistance available to young children ages 6 and younger across Oregon who are currently excluded from SNAP due to their immigration status. And 5 other states, including Washington and California, are already participating. And so this is really the time to close that West Coast gap. And we know there's abundance of research, and we all know that access to food assistance specifically leads to improved long-term health, significantly reduced healthcare costs, improved educational outcomes, and so much more, including being great for local economies. The USDA found that for every dollar in SNAP spent in Oregon, that generates $1.50 to $2 of economic activity in Oregon, which makes sense considering thousands of retailers, grocery stores, farmers markets depend on EBT dollars. But regardless of the economic benefit of this, which would be massive, food is a human right, and that's really at the core of this. And so this bill, Senate Bill 611, has bipartisan sponsorship with 23 legislative sponsors. Our coalition has members from all over Oregon. We have over 185 organizations and businesses representing a wide range of industries and sectors in all corners of the state that have endorsed Food for All. And so I'm just going to put in the chat a link to the bill, a link to our endorsement form if you haven't already endorsed and you would like to endorse, and then a one-pager with just a little bit more information about Food for All Oregonians. You can go to the next slide. And then Indigenous language justice. So this bill would ensure that Indigenous language speakers can access qualified interpreters because everyone deserves to understand and to be understood, especially when they are in high-risk situations, such as like in hospitals, in courts, schools, and public offices. People in Oregon have been denied medical care, have been wrongfully incarcerated, been denied due process, and separated from their families, all because they didn't have access to interpretation. Indigenous language speakers in particular face more challenges to interpretation, whether it's availability of interpreters or the ability of interpreters to translate Indigenous languages. And as I mentioned, these are Indigenous languages from present-day Mexico, Central and South America. And so without interpretation, Indigenous language speakers are locked out and silenced in life-changing situations, which is why we're advocating for this bill to ensure that folks can access qualified interpreters. And it is asking for 1.5 million. We can go to the next slide. I'll pass it to Cynthia.
Thank you. Next, I'll talk about, universal representation. So this provides free immigration legal services to folks who need them. People often get shoved through the immigration legal system without due process. And this is what allows for mass deportation, which is running rampant under the current administration. And as Sammy said before, that these cases are civil cases, so they do not have the right to an attorney. So this is a very critical program to protect immigrant Oregonians. And UREP is actually an existing program that ensures due process by providing legal representation to immigrants facing deportation or seeking to adjust their status. In the first 2 years, this successful program has provided legal support to over 10,000 Oregonians to help maintain stability and for their families and their employers. And this does not have a bill number, but it is a budget request and it is in the governor's recommended budget. So what we're really doing is really pushing her to fully fund this program and to keep it. And I'll pass it back to Sammy.
Thanks, Cynthia. And then finally, the last policy in this package is the home fund. The Home Fund provides, it's an existing program that provides emergency assistance to immigrant Oregonians to prevent eviction and homelessness. And this is done through trusted community-based organizations that often already have that trust and relationship with the communities they work with, something that often agencies don't have. And to really keep our communities stable and our workforce strong, to keep people in their homes, really. We know Oregon is experiencing a severe housing crisis, and immigrant Oregonians are among the most vulnerable community members facing eviction. And so to protect Oregon families from eviction and housing instability and to address this gap, we're advocating for the Home Fund, which would remove disparities by providing up to 2 months rent to eligible applicants, regardless of their immigration status, through that robust and statewide network of community-based orgs. This fund would also connects applicants with support services such as financial counseling, job training, food assistance, and legal services, a lot of things that we all already have access to help immigrants stay housed in the long term. You can go to the next slide. And so this is just a list of our contact information. Cynthia leads on Farm Worker Disaster Relief Fund. I lead on Food for All Oregonians. And then we have Cam, Isa, and Martha on other policies. And so please feel free to reach out to us. And if you're interested in joining our coalition, you can reach out to Adriana, that email there. And so I don't know if we want to make space for questions. Is there time for questions?
We're a little over, but I think we could, one question would be great. Yeah. Anyone have a question? Thank you so much. That was, I feel like I've been hearing about these, but your presentation really gave me a better understanding of the specifics on these.
So it's actually kind of fun to do the dishes. Yeah. My question is, how are we feeling about our success?
I think it varies. It depends on the bill because these bills are all in like different places. And so what we really want to do is we want to advocate for this as a full package to address immigrant attacks like holistically. So for example, like Indigenous language justice, I'm feeling really good about that one. Food for All Oregonians is like kind of like in the middle because we just scaled it and it only cost 7.7 million. But with the federal funding threats, it's going to be more of a push. So we need like all hands on deck. I don't know, Cynthia, if you want to speak to Farm Worker Disaster Relief Fund and how that's going.
That one, I'd also say because of the budgeting, it is in the middle only because of the budgeting. A lot of legislators are in support. They do want to protect our farm workers, and it did get voted out of the House committee it was in. All of these did get voted out, which is really great. But I think like Sammy was mentioning, the budget. So we really want to push this whole package together and get the full budget request that we're asking. But I would say overall, it's going well. Also believe that. Oh yeah, you already said Indigenous language has bipartisan support. And also Food for All, which is amazing. And everything else we're working along.
Amazing. Congratulations to getting to this point with this, all of those bills individually and also this whole package. I mean, this is really, Oregon has come a long way in the supporting this kind of work. And so now we just have to get it across the finish line.
Well, thank you, Sammy, Cynthia, for being here. Really appreciate it. And we're going to move on to our next presenter. We're going to have Alice speak on just kind of general food systems bills and policy and where things are at in this session. So,
hi, everyone. Thank you for having me today. My name is Alice Morrison. I am the co-executive director of Friends of Family Farmers, and I'm in charge of our policy work, and I'm a member of the Community Food Systems at the Legislature working group here at OCFSN. So today I'm going to cover, I put together some more general slides in the beginning and then have a couple of key bill case studies, FOFS priorities, and a little update on where we are with the OCFSN Small Farmer Rancher Disaster Resilience Food Hub and OFMA's Farmers Market Funds that we heard a little bit about from Rep Finger McDonald, and also give you some key dates and some contextualization for what to look out for the rest of the session. So where are we right now? We have as you heard from Rep Finger McDonald, the first chamber deadline has passed. And what that really means is that we're kind of in the midway point of the session, and now there's been the first hurdle that all bills have to overcome to stay alive. So this is the first time that something could be taken off the table. As you heard from Sammy and Cynthia, lots of things are still alive and they're moving through, which is really exciting. And there's much, much, much more work to be done. But we should all, take a little bit of time to celebrate that we've made it through the first chamber deadline that happened last week. And there are 4 kind of outcomes that could have come out of those April 9th deadlines. So, and the chamber deadlines mean that a bill has to have had its public hearing and a work session, which is essentially a committee vote. And I know many of folks on this call are advocates, but there are many ways to work the system here at the Oregon State Legislature. So if you did not meet your deadlines, this is the first time a bill could be dead. That means that the bill would not be moving forward and it's in that bill vehicle. So if it did not get through a work session and get referred out of its original committee of origin, so to speak, that means that that bill is not moving forward. It could be that concept could be amended into a bill with a similar related to clause later in the session in a second chamber hearing. But that particular bill, if it didn't get a work session by April 9th, it is not going anywhere and you have to look for other options. Which is common with many of the bills that we've talked about today, it could have been referred to Ways and Means from its committee of origin. So Ways and Means is a joint committee, so it has senators and representatives, and they do not have to go to a floor vote before they go to Ways and Means. So you would be assigned to a policy committee, and then if your bill has a price tag or what's called a fiscal impact statement attached to it, as determined by the Legislative Budget Office and the departments and agencies that would be implementing the bill, then it has to go to Ways and Means to get fit into the state budget. And so out of Ways and Means, if your bill is down there in that committee, it'll be heard by a policy-oriented subcommittee. So a lot of the bills that I work on end up in the Natural Resources Subcommittee of Ways and Means. Some of the bills that you heard about in the Immigrant Rights Package might go to the Human Services Ways and Means Subcommittee. That's where Double Up Food Bucks goes also. And there's 2 options where you could the bill could be passed out of Ways and Means and then go to a floor vote in both chambers. But also something that's very common is that if your bill has a price tag associated with it, it might not actually pass, but that line item might be included in what they call the Christmas tree bill, which is the budget reconciliation bill at the end of session. So I just want to give folks, because sometimes when we're talking about things in the legislature, people ask me all the time, well, what does that mean? Are we dead? Are we going forward? What are we doing? Are we on the path? And there are lots of twists and turns that your bill can take. And I would also say it's not over till it's over, especially with Ways and Means, because the Christmas tree bill is something that is passed. That budget reconciliation is passed right at the end of session, right before sine die. A third option, if you have not gotten or you haven't been passed out of your first chamber committee, is that you could have been referred to revenue or rules committees. So rules committees and revenue committees are not subject to the same timelines that policy-oriented committees are subject to. So that means that if your bill was referred to rules out of its first policy committee, then there is time for it to have further debate. There could be more hearings. When we were working on SB 85, the Industrial Animal Ag Reform Bill that was happening in 2023, that bill had something like 5 or 7 public hearings. There was a lot of debate on it, and it needed to go to rules to continue discussion, and eventually was passed to the second chamber and ended up passing. So it's not a bad thing to be referred to rules. It just means the discussion is not over. If your bill generates revenue for the state, is a tax kind of bill, then it could be sent to revenue. Revenue also has an alternate timeline to regular policy committees. But the most straightforward path is that you pass out of your first chamber committee, are not referred to Ways and Means or rules, and that means that you would be going to a floor vote in the committee of origin. So for example, some of the bills that I'm going to talk about today that are FOF priorities passed out of their first chamber committee, which was the House Ag Committee. and are now awaiting a floor vote in the House. And then when they pass out of the House, if they pass out of the House, we think we have, you can't make presumptuous statements in the legislature, I have learned. So when the vote happens and it is affirmed that they've passed, then they will be going over to their second chamber. So in our case, our bill originated in the House, so it's going over to the Senate. It will be assigned to a Senate committee, and then the process starts all over again. You'll have another hearing and a work session, and we'll talk about deadlines for that later. Just as a note, if a bill fails its floor vote at this time, then that bill is dead. So just wanting to make sure everybody understands where we are in the process and what the mechanisms here are. But at this point, if it passed out of the first chamber committee, it is likely going to pass out of the floor unless it's a very, very controversial bill or something wacky happens. Okay, so that's where we are in the session and where the outcomes could be. I'm just going to go over 3 bills really quickly, and I know we're short on time, so I will go fast and we can take questions, and I can make these slides available to folks at the end. So BOF has 2 priority bills. Actually, Representative Finger McDonald mentioned both of them, which we really appreciate. So we are working on HB 2164 to add 2 FTE over the next biennium for inspectors for the state meat inspection program at ODA. And this bill originated in the House Ag Committee, and I'll get to the path in a second, but this is an ongoing priority for FOF to increase meat processing capacity for folks who are looking to sell their product within the state lines of Oregon. Because meat processing is one of the most consolidated industries in the country, and it tends to have disincentives for working with small independent producers who are outside of the contract system that feeds into centralized food supplies or multinational companies who are looking to aggregate food from many, many different places. So the state meat inspection program requires that meat be sold within the state borders of Oregon. And that is something that is a great thing for the farmers that I work with who are trying to keep local supply chains and community resilience at the center of their operations. So we are asking for staff time for that program for ODA that they weren't able to ask for because of budget restrictions. The fiscal on this is about $275,000 per biennium. And there is currently federal match. I will say we're keeping an eye on that, and I don't know if it will always have federal match, but right now this project does have federal match available to pay a portion of this cost or a portion of the additional cost. So this is the state cost. So this bill had a hearing in early February in House Ag. It passed unanimously out of that committee. We're so grateful to the legislators who helped us to hear that. It has been referred to Ways and Means, so that's where it is right now, and that's the path it's on because it has a price tag. So it sits there now in the Natural Resources Subcommittee, and you'll be hearing about how to get involved in that very soon. The other thing that we are really prioritizing and championing is small farm water access, and this is the bill that Rep Finger McDonald was referencing about growing food for sale on a half acre using a domestic well. So in Oregon, and this is HB 3372A, and the A just means it has an amendment that's been adopted. So it has been amended. We are supportive of the current bill language. This right now in Oregon, you're allowed to grow whatever you want with no gallon limit from your domestic well on a half acre, as long as that's for personal use. So you cannot sell anything that comes off of that half acre, but you can also use as much water as you want. That is also coupled with a 5,000 gallon per day commercial allocation for any single commercial or industrial purpose, as long as that purpose is not commercial irrigation. So there is no amount of commercial irrigated agriculture that is legal on a domestic well currently in Oregon, but those other 2 half acre and 5,000 gallon exemptions stand. And that that has led to a lot of confusion and a lot of really unfair situations for the smallest actors in the system. So we are proposing with our legislative partners, Representatives Owens and Helm, we are proposing that you can use your half acre for in part or whole for commercial growing. And that half acre would now have a 3,000 gallon daily limit for usage, regardless of use. So that's both personal and commercial. And you can use up to your whole 5,000 gallons per day, as long as your irrigation plus your commercial use does not equal more than 5,000 gallons a day. So essentially, you still have access to that 5,000 gallon commercial. You can use up to 3,000 of it for irrigation, and you can use the other 2,000 for say post-harvest handling, wash and pack, doing value-added products, all of those things that are currently allowed under the commercial for a small farm. So we tried to make this solution right within current exemptions. So we're not adding additional usage. We're just allowing you to use this water for very small scale production, either as a stepping stone to a larger farm business, as Rep Finger McDonald alluded to, or if you are just looking to grow for yourself and sell excess into your community to build resilience and put a little bit extra money in your pockets, you can keep growing, all of those things. And I will say cannabis is excluded as an eligible crop for this half acre. That was important to the sponsors of the bill and should be noted moving forward. And this hearing was conducted right at the end of our first chamber deadline. So hearing was on the 7th. Work session was conducted on the 9th. We passed out of the House Agriculture Committee. Our floor vote was supposed to be yesterday, but due to the backup and all of the conversation about bills, it got bumped to Monday, the 21st. So we anticipate a floor vote on Monday, the 21st. There's a floor letter circulating. There is no fiscal on this bill because it won't change enforcement. Enforcement will proceed the same way it always has with OWRD. And we are awaiting assignment to a Senate committee after passage. We do think this will probably go to Senate Natural Resources, but again, not going to count my chickens before they're hatched. All right. I'm sorry that I'm going so quickly. It's just I want to fit this all in so folks can ask questions if necessary. The other thing that we want to emphasize here is also something that Rep Finger McDonald asked about or mentioned during her presentation, and we were very grateful for her support. HB 2979, which is the bill to renew the OCFSN Farmer Rancher Disaster Resilience, Food Hub Infrastructure and Worker Safety Grants, and the OFMA Climate Resilience Grant Funds, as well as the dollars that are included in that OFMA allocation for getting SNAP technical assistance at farmers markets. So I know that we are heading into it, but okay, so it passed out of House Ag and there was a really great public hearing. Thank you to anyone on the call who testified, really important work. Sitting in Ways and Means, we will get to it soon. Okay, so these are other things that we are looking out for in the budget priorities. And in general, small farm challenges are the challenges that everyone has. Budget uncertainty, federal uncertainty. Rep Finger McDonald alluded to this. If there is a huge pullback of federal funds, the state is going to have to do something to compensate for that. And that means cutting non-human services programs, which sucks. But small farms opportunities is that a focus on local resilience and feeding ourselves is really key and really salient in the legislature right now. There's a strong track record for these programs. Thank you to everyone who participates in them and fills out the data and recording. And we have lots of community support thanks to everyone on this call. Here's some dates to look at. The Senate work session deadline is on May 9th, revenue forecast May 14th, Senate committee vote deadline, or not, it's not Senate, it's second chamber. Sorry about that. Second chamber deadline is May 23rd. And then they're hoping to wrap up the session by the target sine die, which is June 18th. Please attend our briefings Mondays at 12. I will put the link in the chat. Thank you so much.
Nice. Awesome. Thank you, Alice. Always a wealth of information. Let's give an opportunity for a question to Alice if anyone has one. I think you were pretty comprehensive there.
Alice, this is Megan. I have a quick question about the wells bill, the well exemption bill. Was the half acre smaller than you would have liked, or was it what you were asking for?
So I think that there was a lot of discussion on this bill. It has been a long road to get here. And so folks at the beginning, we knew that we couldn't ask for things that were far and beyond above the current exemptions. And so a lot of folks at the beginning were talking about, well, we're allowed to use 5,000 gallons per day for commercial. What if we just, gamed out, like, what if that was the limit and not the acreage limit? And that was something that we did propose at the beginning because a gallon limit makes more sense to us in terms of water conservation than a acreage limit, but there was no political future for a solution that seemed to expand water usage, and expanding out of the currently allowed half acre was seen to expand water usage. And we hit too many brick walls and were told that there was no path forward for it. So we decided to go for a compromise in the middle, but yeah, it was not our first choice. Our first choice was something that had a gallon limit without an acreage cap because we wanted to focus on the usage.
Thanks.
All right, fantastic. Now we'll go over to Sophie to have a quick overview of one of the products that comes out of this working group, our bills to watch and the bills matrix that we track right now, over 40 bills in food systems bills that are in the legislature, and those have been getting whittled down. And yeah, go ahead, Sophie. What's been going on with that, and how does this product work? How do people engage with it?
Yeah. So this is our bills to watch. It is still a work in progress. We're waiting for that first chamber deadline to see which bills we're moving and which weren't. And so I am currently still adding to this, but I put the link in the chat if you want to see the full. I just wanted to give you a little taste of what this looks like. So this is our bills to watch, and essentially every slide is going to look more or less like this, a little bit about the bill, a little bit about why it matters, and then where it's at. So what progress it's seen, any fiscal impact it may have, and then some organizations you can reach out to if you're interested in learning more about this bill. And these are organizations that are either really like champions of the bill or at least monitoring it, organizations that you can get in touch with if you want to learn more. So you've already heard a little bit about 2979, so I won't spend too long. Some other highlights I have are the Double Up Food Bucks, which is inside the Department of Human Services budget. I know Rachel Ward, I believe, is on this call, and she's a great person to reach out to about this. And these are just sort of an example of what you can find when you go to our bills to watch. And I don't want to take too much time since we have one or two more items we want to get to. But if you have any questions about bills to watch, if you have any bills that haven't made it on there yet by, I'd say, the end of next week, because I'm going to double down and try to get every bill that's moved into this by the end of next week, feel free to reach out to me. And yeah, I'm here if you have any questions.